Now we are moving to the ranking session. We often say global academic rankings have gained a strong position on the global landscape. But this landscape is not static. Universities have always been affected by social and economic changes. Rankings have been changing too. In the past, these changes had been generally slow and somehow predictable. The COVID pandemic has changed the situation in a dramatic fashion. The changes we are now facing are so radical that they impact rankings methodology as well as the place of rankings in the academic world. As travel and personal contact are limited, prospective students as well as researchers check rankings to see where to study or where to find contacts needed for research. Following the tradition of IREG conferences, we have asked the authors of the several popular academic rankings to present the state of the arts of their rankings and expected changes in methodology in the wake of the COVID pandemic. During today's session, the following rankings will be presented: ShanghaiRanking, U-Multirank, THE Impact also, and the URAP, University Ranking of Academic Performance. I am very happy. 4 distinguished speakers have accepted my invitation. Wang from China, manager of ShanghaiRanking, Gero from Germany, U-Multirank, Duncan from UK, THE Ranking, and last but not least, Professor Ural Akbulut from Turkey. Academic rankings to present the state of the art. During today's session, okay, dear colleagues, since we have only 80 minutes for the session, I suggest that each speaker takes about 15, not more than 20 minutes to present their ranking. I would like to invite Wang to be the first speaker. She herself is young, but she represents the oldest and respected global ranking, the ShanghaiRanking, first published in 2003. Lu, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Waldemar, for your gracious introduction. And good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks to Eric and King Abdulaziz University for having me here. So I'm honored to have this opportunity to address you online on the IREG Jeddah conference. This session is what's new in rankings, and some of you may already know one of the most significant features of academic ranking of world universities is that its methodology is consistent, but I guess there is nothing new about the methodology, but we still can expect some changes in universities' performance. For example, some new entrants in the global ranking. So today I'm going to share the latest global academic ranking performance of universities from the perspective of ShanghaiRanking. And I'd like to start with a brief introduction of ShanghaiRanking Consultancy, and some of you may already know by the nature and history of religion rankings, we are normally known as a ranking published by the outsiders, and also we are an independent organization dedicating to research on higher education, intelligence, and consultation. Besides IRW, we also have published the Chinese overall ranking and rankings. The global ranking of academic subjects, short for GRAS. Especially this year in June, actually we have released the best Chinese majors ranking for the first time, dedicating for students to compare and choose majors between different universities at undergraduate level. And the academic ranking of world universities, the overall ranking, and the subject rankings present the performance of global universities, and I guess that's mostly related to our audience today. So let's start with the academic ranking of world universities, the overall ranking first. The IRW will focus on the research ability of world universities globally, and it ranks any universities that has any Nobel laureates, field medals, highly cited researchers, or papers in nature or science. Just as it is also in universities with a significant amount of papers in peer-reviewed journals will be also considered. Each year, we scan all universities who meet this criteria to include more universities carrying out research globally. In 2021, ranking more than 2,500 universities have been scanned, and over 2,000 universities actually ranked. But only the top 1,000 universities are published. In 2021, more than 40 universities entered into the top 1,000 list for the first time. And as some of you may already be familiar with, IRW is based on 6 objective indicators about research ability, the alumni, the award, and the highly cited researchers. And also there are 2 research outputs indicators, the publication and the indicator of nature and science. Also, per capita academic performance, the PCP indicator of an institution is also considered. The PCP indicator is the weighted score of the above 5 indicators, the alumni, the award, the highly cited researchers and publications, and the papers in nature or science. All the above 5 indicators divided by the number of full-time equivalent academic staff, including both research and the teaching faculties who actually contribute to the research outputs. And we don't collect data from universities themselves, as you may already know. All of the data are collected from third party, including the official website of Nobel Prize, the field medals, the highly cited researchers, and the Web of Science database, etc. Also, the number of academic staff data is obtained from national agencies such as the National Ministry of Education, the National Bureau of Statistics, etc. And URAL has attracted a great deal of attention from universities, governments, and public media worldwide, and has been recognized as one of the most influential university rankings. So the 2022 edition of URAL will be its 20th anniversary. As a ranking with consistent methodology for almost 20 years, we are proud to see that URAL has supported world universities to benchmark their performance globally and to make comparison with each other. So for the next part, I want to show you some ranking results of URAL 2021. Since URAL has presented the world top universities annually based on consistent methodology, so the number of top universities in 2004 and 2020 can be compared. In the middle of this graph, the red blocks indicate increase in the number of top 100 universities, while the green indicates the decline. From 2004 to 2021, the number of top 100 universities from China mainland increased significantly, just as the performance in other rankings. In 2004, none of the world's top 100 universities was located in China mainland, but in 2021's edition of overall ranking, 7 Chinese universities made the global top 100 and increased from 6 in 2020. Also, the number of Australian universities ranked in top 100 has added up to 7, while the USA lost about 11 positions in top on tier 2021. Compared on the right side of this chart, compared to 2020, the ranking result in 2021 has some minor but important changes. 3 universities entered our top 100 list in 2021, including Sun Yat-sen University, also we call it Zhongshan University from Chinese mainland, which made it first ever appearance in the top 100 list. The Hebrew Universities of Jerusalem and Israel Institute of Technology, also they made their entry into the top 100 list in 2021. Observing countries with outstanding performance in recent years, we have found that top universities are closely related to the world-class universities projects initiated by the government. India, China, Japan, and also European countries like Germany and France, etc., all have initiated projects to construct world-class universities respectively. For example, the Chinese 985 project, which has developed into the double first-class project in 2017, has enhanced Chinese universities' international competitiveness. Universities selected in this project are continuously improving their performance in different rankings in Tier 3 EQS and also in US News. Meanwhile, in our 2021, Germany has 4 universities ranked in the top 100. University of Munich, Technical University of Munich, and Heidelberg and Bonn, all of them have been selected as universities of excellence under the German Excellence Initiative. And also owing to the initiatives of excellence in France, French universities also hold 4 positions in the top 100, which are Perspektywy, Sorbonne, PSL, and University of Paris. And then all of these 4 universities are created or merged into new universities supported by the French initiatives of excellence. And then let's quick move to the Asia universities' performance in our ranking 2021. Actually, in our ranking 2021, about half of the universities ranked in our 2021 are from Asia. China, Japan, Turkey, and India, they have the most universities considered. Regarding the number of universities ranked in top 500, China, Japan, and then South Korea and Israel, they lead other countries with more top 500 universities. And also there are 4 universities from Saudi Arabia listed in the top 500, comprise 17% of all the ranked universities located in this region. So in 2021, the academic ranking of 40 universities in 2021, 6 universities from Saudi Arabia listed in the top 1,000 list. King Abdulaziz and King Saud. They lead others by holding their position in 100 to 150, and King Khalid University and Taif University made their first appearance in URAP, ranked in the range of 800 to 900. Almost all the universities in Saudi Arabia have kept stable performance in global overall ranking, just as presented on the right side of this page, of this slide. And other than strategic world-class project of improving international competitiveness, the pandemic started in 2019 also bring great challenges to universities around the world. It affects international collaboration, students' willingness to study overseas, the research investment from governments, and also it has brought scholars and funding into the research area related to COVID-19. So, in the process of fighting the global pandemic, scholars in the United States, in China, in Germany, or other countries, etc., have made a lot of frontier research. Many of the scholars, they work for universities, which makes these universities gain more international attention and scientific achievements. So take the indicator Nature and Science of indicator, for example, when we researched the research work about the COVID-19, related to the COVID-19 or the coronavirus, the USA, China, England, Germany, and France, they have made the most contribution to research on coronavirus. And also, when we considered the publication in Nature and Science between 2020 to 2021, the England overtakes China and produces the second largest research outputs. So universities in these countries, they have made significant contribution to the global fight against the pandemic, which have been reflected or would reflect in the world universities rankings. And indeed, the great contribution drawn from these research works help our societies, no matter which part of the world, getting through the pandemic quickly should be praised. And then that's pretty much about the global overall ranking. And then let's move to the subject ranking. The global ranking of academic subjects, also known as the GRAS. Due to the time limits, I will briefly introduce the subject ranking, also starting with the methodology. And the GRAS has kept consistent methodology since 2017, and it has expanded from 7 engineering subjects in 2016 to 54 subjects by now. GRAS, it counts the universities that have a minimum number of research publications during the period of 5 years. The publication threshold is different for different subjects. In 2021, more than 4,000 institutions are scanned and covering about 90 countries. And finally, more than 1,800 institutions are ranked. And also in GRAS 2021, institutions are ranked in 54 subjects across natural sciences, engineering, life sciences, medical sciences, and social sciences. In subject ranking, universities are ranked by 5 indicators of academic or research performance as presented in this. The weight is assigned differently in different subjects. The bibliometric data are collected from Web of Science and Insights database. The selection of top journals and significant awards are based on the academic excellence survey conducted by ShanghaiRanking since 2017. But by now, more than 1,000 professors from top 100 universities has nominated the top journals and the top awards in different subjects. So after the analysis, we have obtained these statistics by countries, or it presents the top 10 countries and regions with the largest number of subjects in GRAS. Next, And more than 300 universities from the United States appear, about 4,017 times, followed by more than 200 China mainland universities appear more than 2,000 times. And also other universities like United Kingdom, Germany, Australia, Canada, Italy, France, and they also are presented in the league table for hundreds of times. So that's for that's the basic information and the basic statistics of the subject ranking. And for more information about our ranking results or ranking methodology or the new development on our rankings, please use our website or contact us at any time. And that's basically the end of my presentation. Thank you for watching, and I'm willing to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lu, for your presentation. As I understand you well, ShanghaiRanking Consultancy don't change the methodology in the near future. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Now we move to the Europe. I am sure many of you know Gero Federkeil. Gero is the top expert and the soul behind the European U-Multirank. U-Multirank is different kind of ranking, but it is a very sophisticated one. Gero, we are ready to hear how the present situation will affect U-Multirank.
Yeah, thank you, Waldemar, for this kind introduction. It's a pleasure for me to be again at an IREG conference, although it's a pity that it's still online only. I always enjoyed the informal talk and communication between the sessions and things like that. So today I'm going to present new developments in U-Multirank to you. And for those of you who are not yet quite familiar with U-Multirank, also give a short introduction into its philosophy and methodology. I also prepared some slides on the results and the profile of the universities from the Arab region in U-Multirank. But for reasons of time, I will skip most of them in my presentation, as the presentations will be, as far as I know, made available to you afterwards. You can see it then. So, U-Multirank is a non-commercial, multi-dimensional global ranking, global transparency tool launched for the first time in 2014. It is supported by the European Union plus 2 private European foundations. In our recent 2021 edition, U-Multirank covers 1,948 universities from 96 countries. U-Multirank presents more than 30 indicators covering 5 dimensions of performance: teaching and learning, research, knowledge transfer, international orientation, and regional engagement, each of them both at the level of entire institutions and in a set of 30 subject rankings. In the first part of my presentation, I want to show to you what Waldemar already indicated, that U-Multirank is different, is radically different from ranking orthodoxy. If we look on rankings, traditional rankings, they follow a simplistic model of quality, which very much looks like this one, this example. Yeah, we have a number of data and indicators, and they are mixed up into a total. This is what the traditional rankings do. We have a number of indicators covering different aspects of performance, and they are mixed into a total, which means one number that is measuring the performance of a complex institution like a university. U-Multirank is radically different from this approach. U-Multirank is a multi-dimensional ranking. We do not aggregate our indicator into an overall aggregate indicator. At the same time, this means that we do not give weights to the individual indicators, because we think there are neither theoretical nor empirical weights to reasons to assign a particular weight to a particular indicator. So why 40% on reputation and 20 on citations, and or the other way around? And we think that giving predefined weights to indicators means to decide which indicators are more important than others. in a way is not what users want to be. They want to make their own decisions and should be able to make their own decisions about the relevance of indicators. Second, U-Multirank does not calculate league tables from number 1 to 1000 or whatever. Instead, U-Multirank is ranking institutions on each individual indicator into 5 categories, from top performance A to poor performance E. Because we think, and I will give an example very soon, that league tables tend to exaggerate differences between institutions. And last but not least, U-Multirank is not limited to international research universities, which are in the focus of, for example, also the Shanghai ranking. Instead, U-Multirank includes a diversity of higher education institutions with different missions, different profiles, and different, focus on different parts of the performance. League tables tend to exaggerate the differences between universities. Just to give you a recent example, in an article in a recent article in University World News, pointed out that the City University of Hong Kong was the only Hong Kong institution to make the top 50 in the metric of faculty staff's academic qualifications in the Asia ranking. And this was measured by the percentage of academic staff with a PhD, holding a PhD. But if we look on the facts, the first 33 institutions in this ranking all have the same score of 100. And the score of 99.9 already means only rank 34. On the other hand, rank 51, the reference of this citation, still has a normalized indicator score of 96.4, which means that there is no real difference to the top 50. It's just 3 points in percentage. And we think we can avoid this false impressions of exactness and avoiding exaggerating such differences by just rating the institutions into 5 broad categories for each indicator. Yeah, one issue that was raised to the rankings in this session, how does the pandemic impact the rankings? On the one hand, the pandemic still has an impact on the internal processes. Data collection process was affected. I don't know if the other rankings can confirm this. Some institutions had difficulties to provide the data or provide the data in time. They said that at the moment, understandable, they had other priorities than providing data to ranking organizations. And it had an impact on some indicators. For example, student mobility, of course, dramatically decreased in some countries and at some institutions, so that it was difficult to compare or to keep these kind of indicators stable. The same holds true for a number of internships made by students. Then COVID-19 has become an issue of itself in rankings. The management of the pandemic became an issue. For example, in U-Multirank, we published early this year a COVID-19 radar summarizing the experiences of students with the pandemic management of their institutions, and together with our partner Study Portals, they have this Global Student Satisfaction Award, and in this award there was a special award category in this year on the pandemic management, and the decision about the award-winning institutions were made based on the student survey of U-Multirank. So again, here the pandemic had an impact on, in these kind of awards. And I think the rankings have to adapt to this particular situation. I think we have seen that digitalization and new forms of digital and blended teaching have become more important. The same with different forms of virtual mobility. And we think that rankings should reflect and adapt to these changes and try to include new items, new indicators based on these changes. And last but not least, I think that the pandemic showed the need for cooperation in higher education and in research, not only on the pandemic itself, but also around it. So I wonder if it's still the time to ask who rules, or is it still the best time to heat up competition among universities by rankings, or should we rather focus on cooperation? Then on the Arab universities in U-Multirank, I will just show 2 slides on this. In the 2021 edition, U-Multirank covers 78 institutions from the Arab region. Here you see the distribution by countries. And what we prepared is a kind of summary analysis on the profile of the Arab institutions compared to the global sample. For this, we compared all indicator scores of Arab universities that are above the global average, which means in our top rank groups, A and B, compared to those results that are below global average, ranked in group D and E. The average, the group that is expressing the average position, C, is not included in this analysis, so that is also why the percentages do not add up to 100. If you look on the Arab universities from this perspective, we see that the Arab universities are highly connected, both international and regionally. You see on these 2 dimensions, the percentage of results and indicator scores above average is clearly higher than those below averages. But at the same time, based on our indicators, a set 8 or 9 indicators, Arab universities do not perform that strong in knowledge transfer. Here you see the majority of indicator scores is below global average. This is the thing I want to highlight now. I have some slides more, but I will skip them. You can see them later on. And I will come to new developments in U-Multirank. There are 2 major new recent developments. One is the development of an online benchmarking tool for institutions based on the U-Multirank data. And the second point refers to the development of new indicators. So recently, U-Multirank developed an online benchmarking tool for institutions. This should stimulate and help institutions to learn from others. The idea is that this will be, for a while, it will be publicly available, but in the end, it will be a tool for participating in institutions. This is the starting page of this benchmarking tool. And in the first steps, users have to select the institutions they are interested in. For this example, I took one as a starting point, one institution, Alexandria University, and then the tool offers the possibility to compare to up to 3 universities selected just by name. For this example, I selected King Saud and King Abdulaziz University. And there's an additional option to compare to universities that are member of a particular university networks. Like, for example, it could be CESAR, which is a group of leading European research universities and others. And the 4th option is to select institutions and compare with institutions that are similar on certain dimensions. In these examples, I marked institutions that are similar in age and have the same legal status, which in this example then means public. And I think what is particular good item in our possibility in our benchmarking tool, this is what we learned from stakeholders. They said, well, we want to learn. Not all of us want to learn and can learn from Oxford and MIT. We rather would like to learn from institutions that are slightly better on some indicators or in some aspects of performance. And we added such a tool. Here I selected citation rate, and this means the comparison will include all institutions that are slightly better than Alexandria University in citation rate, and slightly better in a default setting means up to 10% better. So you see with these selections, you get a sample of 13 institutions out of the 950. And then you can compare them on an individual indicator. This is the example of the citation rate. Red always shows your own institution. As I said, in this example, I selected Alexandria University, and then you see the 2 preferred. These are the 2 that are selected by name, and the others that are selected in terms of similarity or slightly better performance. You see they are almost equal in citation rate. Only one is significantly better. In the online tool, if you mouse over the bars, you can also see the names of the institutions. You can then do the same with other of our indicators. This is an indicator we introduced in 2019 2019, if I remember correctly, the percentage of publications by institutions that are published in open access journals. And here you see there are larger differences, and you see again the position of, let's say, your own university. Then you can also compare two indicators or see how, for example, does the number of research publications correspond or correlate with the citation rate. And again, you see the results. Then what the tool also offers, what goes beyond the U-Multirank website. On the U-Multirank website, we only publish the most recent year. But here in the benchmarking tool, you also provide time series. Here for top-cited publications by year, you see the development of the different institutions. And again, if you mouse over the lines, you see the names of the universities. This is what our tool offers to universities. And we think this is a good, based on the stakeholder consultations we organized, we feel that it will be a useful tool for universities to analyze and compare their strengths and weaknesses with other institutions, other similar institutions, competitors, or institutions that are slightly better and from which they could learn. Then development of new indicators. We started a process to develop new indicators in two different strands. One is social inclusion, the second is effective teaching, and the third is education and research for sustainable development. In terms of time, we started with social inclusion. We started to collect data on new entrants by gender, age, disabilities, family background to get an idea of the diversity of institutions, and also started to ask institutions about the existence of outreach programs as one of the measures or aspects of social inclusion. Our plan is to publish or include first a small set of two probably new indicators in the 2022 edition of U-Multirank. Then for effective teaching, for all the three strands, we conducted a number of expert workshops to get informed about the ideas of experts on these issues. And for effective teaching, we will start with the percentage of pedagogically skilled staff and on investment in digital education. And here our plan is to include these indicators into our ranking either or partly in 2022 and partly in 2023. For education for sustainable development, there the impression from the stakeholder, the lesson for us from the stakeholder work and expert workshops was that it will be more difficult really to develop and introduce, operationalize valid and reliable indicators for those two areas. So this will be done in the years afterwards. So these are the major recent trends in U-Multirank. So at the moment, the registration for the 2023 edition is open. It will be opened in January. If your institution is already interested in participating, you can mail us. And at the moment, the data collection for the 2022 edition is still ongoing. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Gero. Now I see that U-Multirank is in the state of impressive development. Your benchmarking tool for institution, it sounds very interesting. The idea to learning from other instead of race for reputation, it's also a very good idea. But I have one question. You want to new indicator, effective teaching, to implement in Multirank. Yeah. In what way do you want to measure this new indicators?
Yes, I think we all know and we all agree that this is probably the most difficult area to develop indicators for rankings. And as I said, this is in a way we follow a limited approach, started slowly and not too big. And as I said, this trying to collect data on how many of the academic staff is trained pedagogically is a kind of input indicator that can give some insight into maybe the the quality of education, but we are not at a situation where we really can directly measure the quality or the outcomes of the education here. I can remind you, you probably remember this initiative of OECD, AHILO, which also had to face tremendous difficulties to develop quantitative outcome indicators on teaching and learning.
Okay, thank you. Also, the THE ranking is in the state of the rapid development. I'd like to invite Duncan Ross, Data and Analytics Director for Times Higher Education. He is the person in a large part responsible for the creation of THE Impact Ranking, evaluating commitment of universities to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Duncan, it is your time now.
Thank you very much, Waldemar. It's great to be here virtually, if not in person. I'd like to start, of course, by recognizing that this is the 50th anniversary of Times Higher Education. So we've been around since 1971. We started out, obviously, primarily as a part of the Times newspaper. We've been independent for many years now. But for those 50 years, we've always had an interest in how we can understand higher education across the world. And increasingly over recent years, that's been through the data that we prepare. And of course, we gather that data largely through the generation of university rankings. So if I can have my slides, please. So when we think about the rankings that we produce at Times Higher Education, we tend to think of them in three broad areas. The first is rankings that look specifically at teaching. And as we just heard, measuring teaching is a really challenging thing to do. And I would argue it's especially difficult to do on an international basis. In our experience, you can actually do some really good work as long as you stay within a single country or a group of countries that have a very similar outlook. And we currently have two teaching rankings. One, the US college rankings that are published in the Wall Street Journal. We also have the Japan university rankings. But I'm not really going to be focusing on those rankings today. Instead, I'm going to look firstly at our research-based rankings and then at our sustainability-based rankings. So our research-based rankings, the World University Rankings, have been around since 2004. Originally, we did them with another company. I won't say who they are. Let's just call them Company Q for the time being. But in 2010, we developed an extended methodology. And it's really focused on what I would describe as research-intensive universities. So, as we just heard, compared to U-Multirank, this is looking at a much smaller grouping of universities around the world. Our participation rules are that universities have to publish at least 1,000 academic publications over 5 years, that they have to teach both undergraduates and postgraduates, and they have to teach across a range of subjects. And our publications, by the way, are taken from the Elsevier Scopus dataset that Mohammed was talking about in the previous session. But then in 2018, which was notably before the pandemic, we decided that we also needed to have some rankings that looked at how universities were contributing to what we believe is still, despite COVID-19, we believe still the primary and most important issue facing the world at the moment is undoubtedly climate change. And the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals give us a really brilliant framework for understanding that issue, and therefore for understanding how institutions like universities can play their part in addressing climate change. Now, the participation rules for the impact rankings are very different than the world rankings. The world rankings, which is focused purely on research, the impact rankings are open to every higher education institution in the world. So let's talk firstly then about the World University Rankings. And the first thing to say is that there aren't any major methodology changes planned for this cycle. We do have some major changes planned for not next year, but the year after. And we'll be reaching out to universities across the world to talk through those over the next 12 months. However, this year, although we didn't change the methodology, we did introduce a new reporter status to reflect the many universities across the world who have been supplying data, but which weren't meeting usually that 1,000 publication threshold. This year, we've ended up with 1,662 ranked universities and 450 reporter universities. Now, data submission for our 2022 ranking, which is confusingly called the 2023 World University Rankings, but it's the one that's published next year, will open on the 10th of January and close on the 30th of March in 2022. One other thing that's really important to mention is that we are committed to being as transparent as possible, both about the methodology, but also significantly about how changes are decided on. And as part of this, we are recruiting an advisory board for the World University Rankings. I've had over 70 fantastic applications. I'm now in the process of sifting through those to find the best group of people to support us in taking this project forward. And really there, I'm looking for a range of different skills. So sometimes we will have university leaders or government ministers. And in other cases, we'll actually have people who are submitting the data themselves. So you get a broad range of expertise. But also it's important that we reflect universities from different parts of the world. So we're really ensuring that the entire world of higher education is reflected in the rankings. It's also important to note that as part of the World University Rankings, we have a number of subsidiary rankings that are very similar. They're based on the same overall framework. And significantly for universities across the Arab region, we launched the Arab University Rankings in the spring of last year. And we were delighted with the 155 universities that took part in that. And that was a really positive step forward. But let's step away from that and think a little bit about climate change and the impact rankings. Firstly, again, I'm going to keep this brief. I'm going to mostly talk and not show you pictures on the slide. Data submission has now closed. It closed last Friday at 11:59 GMT. We haven't quite got to the final numbers yet because some universities have asked us for a short extension as they update their data, but we believe that there will be an approximately 35% year-on-year increase in the number of universities choosing to participate. Now, why is this critically important? Well, as I said before, I firmly believe that climate change is the biggest single issue that the world needs to deal with. And the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals have been agreed by countries across the world as the framework for understanding and for working forwards to ensure that we can mitigate the changes that are already coming. So why universities? Why should universities be measured against those? The first reason is simply one of perspective. Universities and higher education is responsible for about 1.7% of gross world product. It's a huge part of the global economy. If higher education doesn't step up, then it will be hard to see how we would achieve the reduction in climate change. But the second reason is that higher education has a huge opportunity to change things, to actually act as a significant lever in terms of the things it can do. And we view this in our ranking through 4 different areas. Firstly, we look at the research that universities are doing to tackle the SDGs. Then we look at the stewardship, how universities behave with the resource that they are entrusted with, though both physical resources, so your university campuses, but also human resources, your faculty, your students, and your other employees. The third aspect we look at is outreach, the work that you're doing directly in your communities, however those are defined. And then finally, we explore teaching. And it's on that last point, teaching, that I want to highlight a few of the changes we've made to the rankings this year. So we've expanded the section that looks at education for sustainability. And we cheated slightly. We put this within SDG 17. Those of you who know the SDGs well will know that this really belongs in SDG 4. But for various mechanical reasons, we chose to put this in with SDG 17. An SDG, by the way, that talks about those important factors that we heard just a moment ago, the idea of cooperation, of working together, both within the sector and across sectors. And so what we've done this year is we've expanded this question to look at education for sustainability through 3 different perspectives. Firstly, how you're teaching education, or how you're teaching sustainability for your students, which in a way which is applicable to all students. Secondly, how you have specific courses that are focused on key issues of sustainability. And finally, how you use your position in society to ensure that you are broadening that education role outside the university so that more people have a good understanding of what it means to be sustainable citizens. Now, another thing that we're doing that I haven't got a separate slide for here, but I would like to take this opportunity, since we have both ShanghaiRanking and U-Multirank on the call. We've also been working with the United Nations Higher Education Sustainability Initiative to draw up a set of protocols for rankings and other assessments that are including sustainability in their measurement criteria. And at the moment, a number of us have chosen to sign up, including THE, QS, Elsevier are coming on board, and others. And we would like to reach out once more to U-Multirank and ShanghaiRanking and urge them to come on board to that really critical initiative. Now, as with the World University Rankings, we've also created an advisory board. Oops, we went too far there. We've also created an advisory board for the impact rankings. This one is set up and has been running now for a number of meetings. You can see here we've selected a number of people with different roles from across the world. One person we might want to pick out there is, of course, Professor Luis Costa, who, as well as being a former rector and minister from Brazil, also holds the role within IREG. So it's great that he can participate as part of that body. Of course, the final thing we were asked about was this question of how has COVID-19 affected rankings? And it's affected in a number of ways. For the impact rankings, we made some explicit decisions this year to choose to ask universities for data from the previous year. For example, when we look at SDG number 8, which is about economic growth and development, one of the things we ask about is students who have work placements. But of course, during COVID-19, many universities were shut down. The concept of work placements couldn't take place as usual. So in some cases, we've explicitly asked for data from before the COVID-19 outbreak. But when we look more generally at the different types of data that we use, and I'm using here our World University Ranking as an example, but I'm sure that you will see the same kind of challenges for all of the other rankings. When we look at our data, we can see how COVID-19 is having an impact. When we look at bibliometric data, for example, we use a 5-year window, but it's clear that whatever window you use, COVID-19 is beginning to have an impact on the publications that are getting cited, that are getting read out there in the world. When it comes to reputation, for those of us who choose to measure this really crucial understanding of a university's visibility on the world stage, reputation is of course also affected by the work that universities have chosen to do or not chosen to do over the COVID-19 pandemic. And finally, the university data, so data looking at student numbers, the number of international students, this will also be affected by the COVID-19 crisis. Now, have we seen this in our rankings? Well, for many years now, since 2016, I've constantly been asked by people, when will we see the impact of Brexit in the rankings? And I've always tried to explain that's quite challenging to spot. But I think with COVID-19, we have clearly seen the impact. Some universities have seen significant rises in, for example, citation bibliometric scores as a result of the work they've done. A good example would be the University of Wuhan from China, because that's the place where the outbreak of COVID-19 was first detected. Obviously, it's one of the universities that has had the longest history of reporting and had that first outbreak to report upon. So obviously, it has benefited from those publications. But with that, thank you so much for listening to me. Hopefully, I brought that in on time. I look forward to your questions.
At first, congratulations, 50 years of THE. This is the impressive jubilee. By the way, next year, IREG Observatory will celebrate 20 years, because 20 years ago...
You're catching up. No, you're not.
One question to you. Every year, THE try to publish more and more universities. We know that exist globally more than 20,000 universities. If we publish 1,000, this is only 5%. But the problem is because, as we know, you are the famous big data specialist, you know, the data miner and other. We know that over 2,000 or over 1,000 even universities, the differences between the band of the universities are very small, and they are smaller than potential error of measurement. And there is the question: what do you think? Is it possible to cross to publish over 2,000 universities? But for me, 2,000 is kind of border.
So I think there are two different ways of thinking about this. One is the statistical way, and as you've identified, there is this challenge that that you hit a situation where for many universities the differences are lower than the notional error measures. And we tend to approach that by banding universities, so grouping universities together and not differentiating between universities, particularly towards the bottom of our rankings. But there are other ways of thinking about this challenge, and I think one, of course, is the idea of, well, should we limit the number of universities that participate? If we do so, what we tend to do is disadvantage universities that are growing quickly. So universities in the Arab world, for example, tend to find that it takes time to ramp up that expertise in research. And we also tend to end up with rankings that are very biased towards the global north. We do need to think quite carefully about how we make it straightforward for universities from across the world to enter our rankings, and that our rankings don't reflect too much a narrow Western European and North American view of what higher education should be. But I would like to see a situation where in the long run, actually, we have ways of understanding the excellence that we see in universities across the world, all 20-something thousand of them. And what this might mean is that we see a future where rather than having a world ranking, we tend to group rankings around types of university or universities with very similar mission. And that's something that we've been working on at Times Higher Education, looking at how we can group universities together in a way that doesn't reflect crude geographical boundaries, but actually looks at universities that have similar missions, that have similar approaches, that are focused on the same kind of approach. Now, we're several years away, I think, from that. For a start, we need really good baseline data on what universities are, and that is a challenge in itself that we all face within the ranking and assessment space. But I think that's probably the way that we will go in the longer term, and I suspect most ranking organizations will, in the long run, follow a similar approach.
Thank you very much. One of the ranking organizations published more than even 2,000 ranking is URAP, University Ranking by Academic Performance. I am happy to welcome now my friend, Professor Ural Akbulut, former rector of famous Middle East Technical University in Ankara, and also the author of the URAP ranking. Ural, the floor is yours. We have some problem with the voice from Ankara. Okay, I propose to discuss about influence of COVID to the ranking methodology. Who from our colleague is ready to add something? For example, what are the main challenges facing rankings in the COVID-19 period? Gero?
Well, if I start on that, and I invite Lou and Gero to come in when they want to. But I think that there are a couple of different challenges, but part of it depends on what rankings see themselves as being. If you see yourself as being simply a record of what the sector is doing, which is a perfectly reasonable place to be, by the way, then of course you don't need to do anything in your ranking. You can simply say, let's see what the data tells us. That's a traditional data science type approach, by the way. You say simply, let's see what the data tells us. But there are also external challenges as well, and one of which I think Gero, you might have touched on this, is this issue of the time and effort it takes universities to put data together. And undoubtedly during the COVID-19 crisis, universities have had different priorities. How do they get students back onto campus? What does that mean to them? How do they continue research in a way that is productive? How do they maintain their partnerships and so on? So I think there are a number of different things that potentially affect this. And there's this fundamental interesting question of should rankings change what they're measuring to account for the crisis, or should they simply record what is?
I'm very sorry for the problem. It was all my mistake. When Waldemar asked me to give a talk about the new changes or the new phase in Europe, I decided that I should just summarize shortly the things that we have done within the past years. Europe was established in Middle East Technical University in 2009. I was the founder of the institution, sorry, the ranking institution, I mean, and we ranked top 2,000 universities in 2010, and then we also ranked the universities according to 6 basic fields. Now we rank universities up to 3,000. The reason I decided to increase the number of universities in rankings, because former rankings were ranking 300 or 500 universities. I know that when you rank top 100 or top 200, those universities actually do not need to know where they are positioned, but actually who needs the rankings, I thought that would be the developing countries. That's why we increased the number of universities in our ranking. Okay, now we decided that our system, our ranking institution, URAP, would be a non-profit organization, and all the team members are doing this work as a public service. And we decided that our ranking should be based on purely scientific performance or academic performance. Our indicators are number of articles of 1 year, citation, number of citations received within the 5 years, total documents is the number of documents for 5 years. Article impact total is an indicator that we developed to measure the quality of the publications. Citation impact total is similar, and international collaboration, as mentioned before, is the number of articles published with the universities of other countries. When we talk about articles, we are only including Q1, Q2, and Q3 quartile journal articles. We exclude Q4 just to direct the universities to higher quality journals. And we started doing this when Insights decided to announce Q1, Q2, and Q3. This year, I will talk about the details of all of these. COVID-19 preference, we exclude. I will explain why, not the COVID-19 articles, of course, but the preference. I will explain in the next following slides why we did that. Now, citations, that it's the number of citations within the past 5 years for the articles which are published within the last 5 years. Total documents, we use this indicator to help the universities who are strong in social sciences, but not so strong in engineering or science or medicine. Therefore, we know that these universities, social sciences, cannot publish too many articles in journals, but they go to conferences, they write books, they write chapters. So all the documents that they include scientifically are involved in this. That is, as I said, to help universities who are strong in social sciences. article impact total is a indicator that we develop. I think it would be better if I go to the next slide and explain the details of that indicator. Now, article impact total, we do it for 41 different basic fields. Citation per publication of a university divided by the normalized citation per publication, of course, divided by the citation per publication of the world average. We multiply for a specific field, we multiply it with the number of articles in that field, and we do it for 41 fields. Therefore, we try to see how the distribution of the high-quality articles are for different universities. So we expect universities to be strong in various fields, not only one field, let's say, not only in medicine or not only in science. So this is to see quality of the publications, and also to direct universities to publish articles in all the other fields, not only in one field. Citation impact total is similar. I will switch again to the next slide. Here we have similar approach, CPP of a university in a certain field out of 41 divided by the world average, CPP average, and then multiplied by the articles, and we do it again for 41 fields. International collaboration is, we do it for 5 years, and number of articles published with the other countries' universities. Impact of this is about 15%. Now, I will try to give some details why we did some of these changes. Now, we started to exclude articles more than 1,000 authors in 2013, but we applied it only for Turkish universities, because in those days, Insights or Web of Science actually did not give the numbers of authors. But after the certain publication, which I will give detail about it, we had to find a way to find the number of authors, because some articles were coming out with 1,900 or 1,000, etc. So our team decided that it would be easier to count the count the commas between the names. So for several years, that's how we calculated the number of authors. Then in 2017, Insights announced quartiles for journals. The Q1 quartile represents the journals with the highest citations, and Q4 with the least. Therefore, we started to exclude Q4 articles since 2017. This is to direct the universities to high quality journals. Now, I will give little detail. I'm sure that everybody knows, but I will just remind you what happened in 2012. As you all know, Higgs boson was detected in 2 different detectors in CERN, because in 1962, it was proposed that there should be a boson, which was named later on Higgs because of the name of the proposing scientist. But for 60 years, no one was able to detect the presence of Higgs boson. But when they detected with 2 different detectors, CMS and Atlas, the Atlas group published an article with 2,918 authors. And I think CMS published something like with 2,400, I don't recall exactly, but something like that, around 2,000. But in 2015, those 2 groups got together and wrote another, actually they published many articles about Higgs boson, but in 15, they got together and published an article on Higgs boson with 5,154 authors. We knew that multi-author articles were going to harm the stability of rankings, and I will see in the next slide, which shows that my university, Middle East Technical University, was in an interesting position. Times Higher Education ranking announced that Middle East Technical University was within 200 and 300 region in 2014, but in 2015, the number of Higgs boson articles in CERN increased tremendously, and as I said, it went up to 5,154 in 2015, and that was the reason why METU jumped up or stepped up drastically from 200, 300 region up to 85. Of course, it was criticized by many people about it, and we will see what happened next. Sorry. Now, of course, they knew that multi-author articles were harming, but it was a drastic effect in 2015. So in 2016, they excluded articles with authors more than 1,000, and suddenly my university dropped down to 500 to 600. Original 200 and 300 region was because of, again, certain articles, because we have two scientific groups in both detectors. That's why we always had, we always gained articles and citations from CERN. Now, this year, we noticed another irregularity about COVID-19 articles. I will explain in the next following slides what happened, but we are not excluding, of course, all the COVID-19 articles. That's ridiculous. Only the preference. I will explain the detail of that. Now, what do we mean by preference? These are the articles which do not go through refereeing process. They are appearing in the web pages of the journals without any refereeing. They just look at the format. If they are suitable to the format of the journal, they just put it into their web page. Why did this start? 160 distinguished institutes suggested that since pandemic is harming the entire world, and they said, why don't the top journals or other journals give a chance to COVID-19 articles and do not pass them through the refereeing system, but just put it on to their web pages. That's what happened. So many journals accepted that, just to make sure that any findings about COVID-19 could be heard by the other scientists in the world, so that it would speed up to solve the COVID-19 pandemic problem in a shorter time. But of course, that harmed the ranking institutions' results, because 200,000, maybe now more, were pumped into journals because it was very easy to publish an article on COVID-19, whatever you did. And unfortunately, many of those articles were not properly prepared. Some of the data were wrong, and some of the interpretations wrong. Those articles published in the web pages of journals they were given DOI numbers, and they received thousands of citations, and many of them were negative. And most of the authors never submitted their articles to be published in the original journal, going through the refereeing process and receiving page and volume number. These preprints do not have any volume or page number. So that's why we did not exclude the COVID-19 preprints, the articles without any refereeing process. It was found that only 5 to 6%, I said 5 to 10 to be on the safe side, but 5 to 6% of the articles published in the original journal by refereeing were only, among them, only 5 or 6% were originally published as preprint, which shows that most of the authors of COVID-19 preprints hesitate to go to the journal to go through refereeing process. probably they are afraid that they would be rejected because they keep getting citations, so they are happy with it. Okay, now, even though they have no page or volume number, of course, we will, in future, when they apply to the journal to be published after refereeing, we will include them. We are not against COVID-19 articles. We are all hoping that more and more COVID articles appear, COVID-19 appear, because we could find a solution in a short time. Now, this is the last slide, Waldemar, about artificial intelligence. We noticed that artificial intelligence articles are increasing drastically, and we figured out that the number of articles published was sufficient enough to be ranked as a 62nd field in our ranking. We started with 6 basic fields, then we went up to 23 fields, then to 41, and finally to 61. And this year, with the artificial intelligence, we are announcing 62 fields for the world universities. Well, thank you for your attention. If you have questions now or later, I will be pleased to answer your questions.
Ural, thank you very much for your presentation. The URAP ranking has a very solid methodology, and I like your exercise. And it's very interesting that you increase the number of subjects. This is very important, especially for universities from developing country. Dear colleagues, our time is almost over, but I have 2 questions from chat. Gero, I don't see you. Okay, Duncan, a question to you. Is there any change on the reputation survey in terms of methodology? It was said not major changes, but the collection for reputation survey has changed from Elsevier to THE, which raises concerns of impartiality and transparency, as Elsevier was a guarantee researchers and academicians will receive the survey. What is your short answer?
So we are guaranteeing that academics will receive the survey. We wanted to take control, not because Elsevier haven't done a good job. They've been a very solid partner over the last, 6 years. So I had to remember what year it was there. But for this particular part, we want the flexibility to allow us to go in more depth in certain regions and to do this on a time scale where we can adjust things as we go along to make sure that we're getting a well-distributed response. So, for example, when it came to the Arab university rankings last year, that was an example of a situation where we wanted to have more in-depth data from a particular region. And by running the surveys ourselves, we're able to do that. We're able to dig in deep. We're able to ensure that we have a balanced data set in a way that is more flexible, more adaptive, and of course, we can ask other questions as we go along too.
Thank you very much. And a short question to Gero. When the book of indicators 2022 will be available?
Well, at the moment we have the book of indicators for the 2021 edition online, and the new book will be published with the next release. This will probably be at the end of June. And I hope that the book indeed then will include 2 or 3 new indicators as I presented them.
Thank you very much. Thank you for answers. Thank you to speakers and all of you who followed our session the last day. We hope to see you tomorrow during the second day of IREG conferences.